Hello, everyone, and welcome to our debate. My name is Mia McGowan, and along with my group members, Rhiannon Helms and Virginia Gabby, we will be discussing service delivery for transition-age youth and adults. The focus of our debate is the challenges faced by transition-age youth and adults with autism and other developmental disabilities. This includes both the challenges of the individuals when making decisions, as well as the challenges faced by their families and caregivers when making decisions with or for the individual. Topics discussed in this debate will include service delivery models that support the empowerment of individuals with disabilities and models that are in favor of caregiver involvement in the decisions made by or for individuals with autism or other developmental disabilities. The basic definition of empower is, according to Merriam-Webster, is simply to give power to someone. The empowerment side of this debate will show support for allowing transition-age youth and adults with autism spectrum disorder and giving them the opportunity to make decisions and choices for themselves. The definition of caregiver is a person who gives help and protection to someone. The caregiver portion of this debate will discuss the need for caregiver involvement in the decision-making of transition age and adults with developmental disabilities. First, you will hear from Rhiannon Helms in support of empowerment for transition age and adult individuals with autism spectrum disorder. She will address the importance of promoting independent skills in areas including vocational skills and daily living skills. Issues regarding self-advocacy for transition age youth and adult individuals with autism will also be discussed.
Individuals and their caregivers. One of the first things to note is that based on the research reviewed, some studies concluded that individuals with severe cognitive disabilities are not being provided with the opportunity to express their preferences when making choices. The vocational assessments tend to reflect the caregiver's ideas about what the individual should do after school. This limits the ability of the disabled individual to become self-determined and empowered. In a study conducted by Martin et al., 2005, their research showed that there was a 36% match in caregivers and the disabled individual's setting preference, an 18% match for preferred activity choices, and a 33% match for characteristic choices. When caregivers make all of the decisions and the client is not involved in the processes, we are violating Code 4.02, involving clients in planning and consent. Behavior analysis involved the client in the planning of and consent for behavior change programs. Clients can and should be empowered to make decisions about their programs to the extent that they are capable. Differences based on severity of disability. As stated earlier, most individuals with cognitive disabilities are not given the opportunity in making educational decisions or vocational decisions. In a study conducted by Lansney et al., they concluded that once a choice-making response is taught, most people with intellectual disabilities can cope with choice situations and make choice responses. The same study also concluded that choice-making can be successfully accomplished within the individual's daily routine. Teaching a response method must be structured so that individuals with disabilities can learn to make informed decisions. This means that individuals with disabilities can make certain decisions for themselves. Daily living skills. In 1978, the Rehabilitation Act came before Congress. Title VII was added to establish a number of independent living programs designed around the theory that if more people became independent, they would be more employable. There are more than 600 centers around the country. The Act also requires that those centers be community-based, nonprofit corporations that offer these four core services: individual and system advocacy, information and referral, independent living skills instruction, mentoring, and support. Related services also include accessible housing search and home modifications, advocacy services to monitor individuals living in nursing homes to move into community living arrangements, job training, placement, and accommodations and support, transportation services including bus training, van modifications, and carpooling. In research conducted by Domer and Wolf, they found that independent living skills are a primary concern for parents and family members of individuals with autism and other disabilities. Daily living skills include things like dressing, hygiene, household chores, cooking, and community living skills. It should be noted that failure to teach these skills to these individuals can result in learned helplessness, poor self-esteem, and just an overall lower quality of life. A quote by Temple Grandin is, "Social thinking skills must be directly taught to children and individuals with ASD. Doing so opens the doors to social understandings in all areas of life." There are many practices that can be utilized to teach these skills to individuals with disabilities. However, teachers have reported that finding the appropriate interventions can be daunting. One of the techniques that has had successful progress in this area is video modeling and video prompting. Video modeling has the individual watch the entire target skill or task as it is being performed. The video prompting breaks the video segments into smaller, discrete steps for the individual to learn instead of the entire task at once. The study conducted by Domer and Wolf also showed an increased rate of independent responses after only 10 sessions. Teach is another program that has been utilized to support and empower individuals with disabilities, and it helps them find employment. The Teach program became a supported employment program in 1989. Since the program has been in place, they have had success in finding over 96 jobs for individuals with disabilities. The Teach model utilizes information on individuals' strengths and interests. They identify appropriate jobs for those individuals with disabilities and autism based on their interests and strengths. And then they provide extensive long-term support. The individual with the disability is provided a job coach that helps them through the process of finding the job and offers support to them during the job and during the training. They also supervise the individual on site at the job. The Teach staff member also trains and provides information to everybody at the job site. In order for placements with the Teach program to be successful, there are a few factors that must be considered. Receptivity of the employees and coworkers. They will need to be willing to learn about autism and the disability. The work area must be clearly defined with few distractions, and it works best if the tasks are clearly defined also. The jobs must be predictable, and they need to be adaptable to a schedule for the individual with autism or disabilities. And Mia will now share a graph that we have that shows the occupations.
Okay, as you can see here in this figure, promoting independence and self-advocacy in individuals with developmental disabilities through independent living opportunities may lead to higher rates of paid jobs in the community. We also see that facility-based settings, such as institutions or community-based residences, reflect higher rates of unpaid employment activities. This information was collected from an article titled National Core Indicators, Data on the Current State of Employment of Adults with IDD and Suggestions for Policy Development, and it came from the Journal of Vocational Rehabilitation, published in 2015. If we look at the far left, we have information collected on individuals that receive institution-based services. Only 1.4% of these individuals have paid community jobs, and 46% engage in unpaid facility-based activities. This indicates minimal empowerment for the adults to make their own decisions, especially due to financial limitation. If we then shift our attention to the individuals living in an independent home or apartment, we see increases in the percentage of individuals with paid community jobs rise to 24.3%, and unpaid facility-based activities drops down to 24.2%. These numbers reflect that individuals with ASD and developmental disabilities can achieve more financial and job independence through empowerment and a less restrictive living environment. Although the placement of individuals will most likely always depend on the skill set they have to support themselves within that environment. Rhiannon will now continue with more information about the empowerment side of this debate.
Thank you, Mia. Another tool that can be utilized is helping empower individuals with disabilities is the Supports Intensity Scale, also known as SIS. This scale does not focus on what the individual can't do. This scale focuses on one's abilities and preferences. I would like to share some information that is directly from the SIS website. SIS is an empowering tool. SIS gives a person with an intellectual disability an opportunity to plan a life of choice and in the process live a quality, independent life in the community. SIS is also a reliable assessment, has a 0.87 on the inter-rater reliability coefficient, which means it's an excellent range for assessment instruments. This means that SIS can be used to promote empowerment in individuals with disabilities. Persons with disabilities can have productive quality of life within their communities. One final quote about SIS. The supports intensity scale is one of the most significant tools to come along in my entire 35 years of service in the disability field, and I cannot say enough about the critical need for such an instrument in determining service needs, setting rates, and supporting the planning process for persons with developmental disabilities. And that was from Ron Weiscarver, President and CEO of the ARC program in Peoria, Illinois. There are tools available to individuals with disabilities that can help them become empowered by teaching them how to take care of themselves and how to make informed decisions within the extent that they are capable of. We are not stating that individuals should be empowered to make decisions beyond their capabilities that would cause harm to themselves or others. That would be in violation of Ethical Code 7.02, ethical violations of others and risk of harm. If a client's legal rights are being violated or if there is the potential for harm, behavioral analysis must take the necessary action to protect the client, including but not limited to contacting relevant authorities, following organizational policies, and consulting with appropriate professionals and documenting their efforts to address this matter. This code also addresses the medical side of the empowerment for individuals with disabilities, because we can't advocate for individuals with disabilities to make decisions that would cause harm to themselves or others. In one case, an individual with autism may be able to go to the doctor in an emergency situation, but in another case, the individual may not have the ability to decide to go to the doctor when it's appropriate, but through empowering them with assistive technology, they can use communicative devices to express what hurts them to the doctor. So it varies depending on the severity of the disability, but no matter the severity, they can be taught empowerment in some ways. It just may look different in some than others. We also need to see these individuals as people that have feelings they want to express just like the rest of us, which brings me to my next topic under empowerment, and that is disabilities and sexuality. The SIS has a domain that is titled Social, and there's a portion that asks about the capability to have an intimate relationship with another person. This allows us to determine the levels of support a disabled individual would need in order to be successful in a relationship with another person. In an article by Holmes and Himley, they mention that the area of educating individuals with autism about sexuality is largely neglected. This is somewhat due to parents not knowing how to approach the topic with their disabled loved one. In the same study, individuals with autism reported that they learned the majority of their sexual knowledge from peers or just information that they found out for themselves. The study concluded that 90% of high-functioning individuals with autism had a desire for a relationship, such as dating, marriage, and a future family. And 39% of low-functioning individuals also had the same desires for relationships, such as marriage and dating and family. I would like to go to the self-advocacy piece now. Open this section with a quote from Dr. Temple Grandin. There needs to be a lot more emphasis on what a child can do instead of what he cannot do. Parents generally make all the majority of decisions for individuals with disabilities to ensure that their needs are met. Parents and caregivers want to make sure that their child gets what they need, deserve, and want. According to the Autism Speaks Transition Guide for individuals with autism and other disabilities, they will need to learn how to advocate for themselves to the best of their ability. One way that we can help individuals advocate for themselves is by teaching them to have a sense of self. There is a need to see these individuals as people with preferences just like the rest of us. They want to make decisions on their own. They just need supports and resources to show them how to do it. They need to be taught these skills in a non-traditional manner. I would like to close my portion of the debate with the legal rights. It is important to remember that IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act of 2004, states that the purpose of special education is to ensure that children with disability receive services and it emphasizes special education and its related services. And within these services, it is required that the students receive a transition assessment to help with vocational and figuring out what they would like to do for occupations. It is needed to help the students with no previous job experience become aware of the jobs that are available in their communities and determine their preferences for these jobs. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973. The main thrust of this act was employment of persons with significant disabilities, and in 1978, a portion was added that established centers that would train individuals for independent living to the extent possible. The Developmental Disabilities Act of 1984. This act proposed employment. Supported employment is for persons with developmental disabilities for whom competitive employment at or above minimum wage is unlikely, and who, because of their disabilities, need ongoing support in the work setting. It is conducted in various occupational settings, particularly in areas where people are employed that do not have disabilities. And it is supported by an activity needed to sustain paid work by individuals with disabilities, including supervision, training, and transportation. And that was also discussed a little bit earlier in this debate. So ultimately, our goal is to help individuals become empowered to the extent possible without causing harm to themselves or others.
Now that we've heard the information and research in support of empowering transition age youth and adults with ASD and other developmental disabilities, we will explore the caregiver side of this debate. As stated earlier, caregiver is loosely defined as a person who gives help and protection to someone. The following information presented by Virginia Gabby will support this definition. The role of the caregiver as protectors and advocates for transition age youth and adult individuals with autism spectrum disorder and other disabilities will be discussed, and research supporting the need for caregivers will be identified.
So first off, let's start with caregivers as protectors. Transitioning into adulthood is difficult for most people. Newfound adult stressors such as continuing education, employment options, and relationships can challenge even the most well-adjusted young person. Persons with developmental differences or disabilities can be left behind as they age out of service and age-specific related programs, unsure of their next moves because of limited options or not having the cognitive skills to make safe and well-thought-out decisions. The daily structure they once knew through schools or day programs shifts, and many find themselves struggling in a larger and less protected world. Yes, empowering young adults with disability to make decisions is important. However, the question should not be, can they make decisions, but rather, is this person as skilled as any other same-aged young adult without disabilities when presented with potentially harmful situations or adult stressors? Studies and national statistics tell us no. Mia?
So now we're going to look at this visual, which shows us an increased need for caregiver involvement due to high rates of victimization in individuals with disabilities. Although there is a decrease in victimization across years in some age groups, if we look at the numbers overall, some of the highest rates of victimization occurs between ages 16 to 19 and ages 20 to 24. This age span, although quite large, encompasses the transition age and young adults population of individuals with developmental disabilities. In comparison with the victimization of individuals without disabilities, the numbers are higher in all categories, but are significantly higher in the 16 to 19 age range, as well as the 20 to 24 age range. For example, if we look at the rates of individuals with disabilities ages 20 to 24 that were victimized in 2009, we see the number 103.8, nearly 3 times the rate of individuals without disabilities from the same age group in the same year. This graph displayed information that supports the need for caregiver involvement in decision-making and daily living in order to prevent further risks of victimization of individuals with developmental disabilities.
Thank you, Mia. And also, suicidality is a deeply concerning risk of the transitioning young adult. Research shows us that individuals with ASD times more likely to attempt suicide due to social isolation. Research also shows us that young adults with ASD are highly susceptible to sexual victimization due to less knowledge about sexual contact, less knowledge about sexual behavior, and less peer-to-peer information. The subtle and not so subtle nuances within an intimate relationship may be very difficult for individuals lacking social knowledge. Thus, caregivers are vital in their roles as protectors. Behavior analysts have a responsibility to operate in the best interest of the client. If the best interest of the client is to empower a caregiver in order to protect the person with disabilities, then that is what we must do. Treatment, intervention, and efficacy. Clients have a right to effective treatment. Empowerment alone may not be the most effective treatment for a large number of individuals when it comes to protecting or advocating for themselves. Supported decision-making involving caregivers should be fostered and implemented. Caregivers as advocates. Adulthood is really hard. I mean, it's really hard, guys. And as individuals with developmental or intellectual differences transition into adulthood, the need for caregivers as advocates becomes increasingly necessary in a variety of very complicated areas. It's important to understand that people with disabilities have the right to make poor decisions just as any other person without disabilities. However, it is also essential to understand that some people with disabilities may not have the social or cognitive skills are positive or in their best interest or age appropriate. Caregivers acting as advocates in the area of healthcare is crucial. Mia?
If we look here at this graph quickly, you can see that over 40% of individuals with disabilities also have 4 or more chronic health conditions that they need to deal with and monitor on a daily basis. And with a complex healthcare system as well as complex health conditions, there's more a higher need for caregiver involvement when monitoring health conditions and navigating the healthcare system.
Thank you, Mia. Yes, and however, sometimes navigating the healthcare system is not that complicated, and caregivers act as advocates on a day-to-day basis for routine doctor visits. For example, case study with Joe. Joe is a 23-year-old young man with autism, and he recently fell and injured his wrist. The process for Joe to receive appropriate medical attention would be as follows. Joe must report his situation to the correct person, as any other 23-year-old might do, meaning that Joe must call a doctor. He must set an appointment. He must attend the appointment. He must provide his healthcare ID while at the doctor, Joe must explain what his symptoms are so that he can be treated. But because Joe has limited verbal skills and does not engage very well socially, it is imperative for Joe's caregiver to advocate and to attend to each of these steps and supporting him so Joe can be treated. Caregivers also act as advocates in employment. While it's true that empowerment to choose a job or a career focus gives an individual a sense of identity, a sense of self, and its self-worth, there are many areas within the employment field or just the process of obtaining a job where these steps can be very difficult. For example, Maria, a 20-year-old young woman with Down syndrome, would like to work with children at a daycare center. She's very good with children. However, Maria has difficulty understanding the application process. For Maria to be successful in obtaining and in maintaining a job, she must apply, speak with a potential employer, understand the requirements of the position for children in her care, keep up with the demands of her job, as well as doing the same tasks as her coworkers. Maria's best opportunity for success in her decision-making to work in a daycare center would be to have her caregiver support her in her areas of deficit. So what do we do with this? And how do we measure these pieces between empowerment and caregiving? Caregivers are essential, they just are. And creating a baseline of support needs is also essential as a person transitions into adulthood. The baseline acts as a springboard for effective treatment and person-centered planning. One such tool, as Rhiannon has mentioned earlier, that's been adopted by 24 states is the supports intensity scale. Effective treatment procedures have been validated as having both long-term and short-term benefits to clients and society. Developed by AAIDD, the American Association of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, the Support Intensity Scale, or SIS, has been normed with over 3,000 individuals over a period of 7 years internationally and has been deemed valid and statistically reliable when administered by an objective third party. The SIS is administered every 3 years once a person becomes 18. It is not a measurement of cans or can'ts, but rather it's a measurement of what the person needs to be as successful as any other same-aged adult without the disability. The support intensity scale is a direct and reliable, valid measurement of support needs in 57 life activities. It is a ranking of support needs in 15 medical and 13 behavioral areas. The areas include self-advocacy, employment, home living activities, medical support needs, and social needs. The assessment is a percentile ranking of each person's needs based on national field test data and supports a solid knowledge on a person's needs, preferences, and goals for life. It provides information to make judgments on an individual's support needs, direction on resource allocation, and financial planning. Guidelines on integrating the support intensity scale into the person-centered planning process. Compliance dictates behavior analysts involve the client in planning of and consent for behavior change programs. Well, in order for the support intensity scale to be administered, no less than 4 people must be present. The client, 2 advocates who know the client well, and the assessor. The assessment becomes part of a client's medical record to ensure consistent treatment, and because it is administered every 3 years, there is a measurable accounting of change. Caregivers are the key to successful implementation of this assessment. This assessment is robust and dynamic and follows a person throughout their life as they gain and maintain adult living skills.
Many challenges are faced by transition-age youth and adults, their families, and caregivers. Choices must be made about future services, job placement, healthcare, and a variety of other aspects of life must be addressed in order to ensure a positive quality of life. Based on the information presented today, you can see there is strong support for the need to empower individuals with disabilities. Creating opportunities for them to make their own decisions is necessary. While empowerment is an essential component of transition age services, being aware of certain limitations of the individuals that the individual may have is also very important. Caregiver influence may be necessary for some individuals with developmental disabilities. Ultimately, the goal is to build a foundation of support that provides appropriate levels of input from the caregiver while still allowing the individual to make decisions for themselves. Thank you for watching our debate.